Hello everyone, welcome to the new video of our series Virtualization with Hyper-V. In this video, we are going to create the lab for virtual switches. We will see how we create external, internal, and private switches in our virtual labs. So let's get started and start creating the virtual switches in Hyper-V. So we have our Hyper-V Manager console on the screen right now, and I have these virtual machines already created. So we will try to establish the connection between two virtual machines using all these virtual switches, and we'll see how different they act when they are connected with private, internal, and external switches separately. So first, we need to go to Hyper-V Virtual Switch Manager, and in here you will see that we have the option of creating external, internal, and private switch. So first we will start with private switch. So let's click on private switch and click on create virtual switch. Now we are just going to provide the name for this private switch, v private 10. Let's give it 10. And if you need to mention any notes, you can mention it as a description, and make sure you select private network in here, and then you can click on apply. And on the left hand side you will see that in this list we have got v private 10 added. Let's click OK. Now where do we see this virtual switch? How do we find out that it's been created? So one place where we can search for it is your network and sharing center, that you can open using ncpa.cpl by typing it in the run box, or just go to network and sharing center through your control panel. Now in here we'll have to check that do we get the private switch in network and sharing center as an adapter. If you remember, in our last video we talked about that private switch does not create a virtual adapter for the management OS. So you will not be seeing the virtual private switch in network connections with all these adapters. You can see that we have got external, internal, internal, Wi-Fi, but we do not have any private switch. Why do we have this scenario? Because we already discussed that in case of private switches, our virtual machines are only able to talk to each other. They are not able to talk to the management OS or to the Hyper-V host. That's why there is no virtual adapter being created on the management OS. So now let's go to Hyper-V Manager console, and we are going to use two virtual machines in this lab, TG Client 1 and TG SVR 2019, and we will find out that how the communication works between these virtual machines. So let's right click on this TG Client 1. So now first our task would be to assign that virtual switch to the virtual adapter of this virtual machine. So we have opened the settings of this virtual machine. Let's go to the network adapter. Now you will see that I have already created two adapters for this virtual machine. So I can use any of these, or let's do one thing. This one is not connected, so we can simply go ahead and remove this. Okay, so we have removed this. Now let's go to this network adapter and select the private switch that we created. So you will see that we have got v private 10 right here. Okay, now let's just click on apply and click OK. So we have assigned the virtual private switch to this virtual machine, but what is pending? Uh, we need to assign the IP address to these virtual machines statically, because right now we do not have any DHCP server in our environment. If you have a DHCP server, an existing DHCP server in your environment for the virtual machines that you are going to connect to this private switch, then you can definitely use that DHCP server to assign the IP addresses dynamically. But in our scenario right now, we are going to assign the IP address statically. So always remember, you have got two ways always to assign the IP address to any virtual machine. First, you can assign the IP address in a static way, or you can use the automatic configuration, which will assign the IP addresses dynamically using the DHCP server in your environment. So let's connect to this virtual machine. Let's right click on it and click on start, and this will start this virtual machine. You can always check the status of this VM right here in the summary, and it will show you right now it has the Windows icon on it. So that means it's starting up at this moment. All right, it has started, so almost there. So let's click on connect and make sure you select it or drag it to the large screen resolution. All right, it's just about to be there. So okay, so now we will need to use the password that we set for this particular virtual machine. And while this is getting logged in, let's also assign the virtual switch to this virtual machine. As you can see, we also have two network adapters for this. So let's remove these. So I have removed one of these, and then I will use vprivate 10 for my second virtual machine, and then click on apply and click OK. Now one more thing which I would like to show you guys is that you can add as many adapters as you want to your virtual machine. All you need to do is click on add hardware, click on network adapter, and click add. And that will add another virtual adapter to your virtual machine. It's just the same way as we have multiple physical NICs on our physical computer. So you can also add the virtual adapters to your virtual machines as per your requirement. So right now, we are going to cancel this so that we do not add an extra one. So right now we only have one, and we have assigned it to the virtual switch with vprivate 10. Okay, now let's start this. Okay, our TG client 1 has already been started. Okay, we are logged in already. Let's close this, and I'll need to disable this Internet Explorer from the startup to get started automatically. Okay, let's also quit this. All right, now our next step would be to go to the network connections inside virtual machine. So where we will go? We will go to ncpa.cpl, and in here you can see that we have got one virtual adapter showing up, and you will see that it will always have Microsoft Hyper-V network adapter as its name. That specifies that this is a virtual adapter that we have created using the Hyper-V. So if you go to properties, right now it's showing unidentified network because we haven't really assigned any IP address on it. So that's why it doesn't have any connection or any network to connect. So let's go to properties, and let's go to Internet Protocol version 4, which is TCP/IP property. Double click on it, and right now you will see that the default option which is selected is obtain an IP address automatically. Now this option will only work when you have a DHCP server in your network, because what a virtual machine or a physical machine do is it search for the DHCP server within the same LAN network, and if it finds that there is a DHCP server in that network, it will send a request to um, receive an IP address from that DHCP server. Then the DORA process that we all know about DHCP, that gets followed, and the machine gets an IP address. We will also talk about the DHCP and DNS in detail in a separate video, so that you guys have understanding of that too. So in here, what we need to do is we need to select use the following IP address in order to assign a static IP address to this virtual machine. Now, we should already know that which network we will be using, which subnet we are going to use for this particular network. So let's say we are going to use 192.168.150.10. All right, and by default for this class, which is C class IP address, we'll get the subnet mask, which is 255.255.255.0, and the default gateway. Now in this case, our virtual machines are not going to go out of our private virtual switch, so that's why we don't have to specify a default gateway in this case, because we don't have a management OS virtual adapter. All right, now next you need to do is, for now we will just assign the same IP address as a DNS server, because right now we don't have a DNS server in our network and our virtual machines cannot connect to internet. That's why we cannot even use Google or any public DNS servers in here. So let's just specify its own IP address, which will be, we can say, a loopback IP. You can also mention 127.0.0.1 for this, but for now we are just going to go with this IP address. All right, so let's click OK. Make sure you remember the network address that you're going to use, 192.168.150.10. All right, now let's click OK and click OK again. All right, so now let's go to command prompt and we will try to check that which IP address is assigned to this virtual machine. So let's go to IP config, and you can see that it has the IP address now, which is 192.168.150.10. All right, now what we need to do is we need to go to our second virtual machine, which is TGSVR 2019. Okay, and then go to large. All right, and let's use the password. Oh, all right, looks like I got it wrong. Let's try another one. There we go. All right, let's close this out, cancel it, and go to network connections using ncpa.cpl. And let's check one more thing before we assign a static IP for this. Let's try to find that which IP does it have right now. So now you will see that right now it has the IP of range 169.254.218.56. This IP address belongs to a PIPA IP address range, that is automatic private IP addressing. What does that mean? That whenever a machine does not find an IP address from a DHCP server or from a static way, then it assigns itself a PIPA IP address, which is of this range 169.254.0.0. All right, so always remember that if a virtual machine does not get an IP address from DHCP or static way, it will assign a PIPA to itself, and it will not be able to communicate with any network in your LAN environment. So let's go ahead, right click on properties, click on this and this, and make sure you assign the IP address of the same range. So we did 150.10 for the earlier one. Let's do 11 for this. And let's go to 192.168.150.11. All right, let's click OK and click OK again. Now let's go to ipconfig. Okay, looks like it hasn't been applied yet. It's applied now. So it's getting the IP address now. Now let's try to ping the other virtual machine that we have. The IP address of that VM is 192.168.150.10. So we'll see if it is able to ping that virtual machine or not. So as you can see right now, it's showing us the message that request timed out. Now why it's doing that? Because ideally once we connect two or multiple virtual machines with the same virtual switch or the private virtual switch, they should be able to communicate with each other internally. They may not be able to, or they will not be able to communicate with the host, but they should be able to communicate with each other. Now we need to find out why it's not able to talk to its other virtual machine, which has the same range of IP address and it's in the same network. So one reason could be the firewall on that virtual machine. So we need to make sure that the firewall is turned off for that particular virtual machine so that no traffic gets blocked. So first, let's make sure that the firewall is off on this one. So we can go to runbox, type firewall.cpl, and we can see that the firewall is turned off on the TGSVR 2019 virtual machine. Now, our next task would be to go to our other virtual machine, that is. Now, our next task would be to go to our other virtual machine, that is TG client 1. So we have it opened already, TG client 1. Now let's go to firewall.cpl on the same virtual machine, and we can see that the firewall is on this particular virtual machine. So let's go to turn Windows Defender firewall on or off. Let's turn it off from here and click OK. Now the firewall is off on this virtual machine. Now let's go back to our virtual machine TGSVR 2019, and now let's try to ping 192.168.150.10. And here we go. Our virtual machine is able to talk to the other virtual machine, which is connected with the same virtual private switch. Now let's go to the other virtual machine once again and try to ping this one from there. Let's right click, run cmd, and go to ping 192.168.150.11. So we can see that both of our virtual machines are able to communicate with each other. That's because we have connected both of these to the same virtual private switch. Now, according to the private switch, the virtual machines will not be able to talk to the Hyper-V host. So let's find out whether these virtual machines are able to communicate with the host or not. And another thing to make sure is that we do not have any internet access on these virtual machines, because these do not have any access to the external sources or external networks. So that's why with private virtual switches, you will not be able to access internet on your virtual machines, because it is used for the isolated networks. All right, let's try to find out the IP address of our Hyper-V host so that we can try and communicate with the Hyper-V host from our virtual machine. And we know that we should not be able to communicate with the host because we are using private virtual switch. So let's go to our Hyper-V host and let's go to command prompt, type ipconfig, and make sure you are checking the IP address for the adapter that you are connected to on your computer. So right now you can see that I'm connected with my Wi-Fi. So I need to check for the adapter of my Wi-Fi. So this is the one, wireless LAN adapter, Wi-Fi, and this is the IP address 192.168.1.109. Right. So now I'm going to let's try to ping the virtual machine from here first. 192.168.150.10, and we know that the network range is also different, so there are hardly any chances that these two will be able to communicate with each other unless we have some kind of routing enabled between them. So we are going to ping this IP address, and you can see it's not pinging, it's request timeout. Let's also try to make sure that the firewall is disabled on the host. We already confirmed that firewall is disabled on our virtual machine. All right, you can see that firewall is already turned off, and you can also check it from here, and you can see that turn off is selected. So that means our firewall is already off on the Hyper-V host. So we don't have to change anything for it to make work, because this should ideally do not work. All right, now let's try to ping this same IP address from our virtual machine as well. So our IP address is 192.168.1.109. So let's go to our virtual machine, ping 192.168.1.109. And you can see that it's showing transmit failed because it's not even able to reach to that gateway or to that network. So that's why it's not going out of its own network, and it's showing us ping transmit failed, general failure. Now let's confirm once again that we are able to talk to our other virtual machine, which is 150.11, and you can see that we are able to talk to our virtual machine. So now we have understood that if we use private virtual switch in Hyper-V, our virtual machines which we will connect with that private virtual switch will only be able to communicate with each other. They will not be able to communicate with the Hyper-V host, and they will not be able to access internet at all. So that's how private virtual switch works in Hyper-V. I hope you were able to understand the concept of private virtual switch. In our next video, we are going to talk about the external switch and internal switch. We will create the lab in which we will create an external and internal virtual switch, and then we will connect our virtual machines with those switches, and we'll find out how exactly networking works with internal and external switches in Hyper.
Thank you everyone for watching the video. I hope you understood the concepts that I explained here. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.